I don't like pickles on my cheeseburgers.
Yes, you do. You get like quad pickles on everything.
I do not.
Extra pickles is the best.
Pretty sure I've consistently asked for no pickles my whole life. Disgusting.
Extra pickles is the way to go. And what we do is, Dan, when we go out somewhere, you take the pickles off your burger and you give them to me. Because I want the extra
Yeah,
pickles.
but that's gross, man. It's so gross.
But it's extra pickles, and you haven't ate them yet.
Fair enough.
And if you're still mending those words from the exit wound, then you are ready for this episode of Discography Discussion. I am Joe, that is Dan, that is Buddy.
Yo!
And it's finally happened. We're talking about Napalm Death.
Yeah,
Oh
I
God.
think, it's more appropriate to be like, Napalm Death!
Or you could do it like Barney,
No, I can't do it like Barney. Barney's a unique man.
The weird thing about this band is the vocals are extremely consistent, but the music, well, you can play a little shuffle game and figure out, are you going to get a punk band tonight, a thrash band? It's up to you, really. What do you want to hear from Napalm Death?
All heavy all the time. Pretty much no matter what, across the board. If your band's called Napalm Death, you have to live up to the name Napalm Death. It's just a fact. Where do we want to start with this band? I mean, 1987. They were around actually for several years before that in the 80s. They started off as kind of like an anarcho-punk band, or just, for everyone else, just a punk band. And they were heavily politicized lyrically. And they just kind of, I don't know if they were on speed or what the deal was, but they definitely pushed the envelope as to how fast human beings can play punk rock. It was very much in the beginning, whoever gets to the end of the song first wins. And they did that extremely well. And, I could go through the 10 to 15 other releases that were like demo releases prior to the release of Scum. But I think we should really start off with Scum.
And it's funny you say 10 to 15 releases before Scum, because there are 14 releases after
15.
Scum.
15 releases,
15?
friend.
Oh, God. See, there's too many. I can't even keep count.
There's 14 releases after Scum. If you count Scum, it's 15 releases.
So, in a
Close
way,
enough.
Scum is the middle of the story, even though it's the beginning of the story.
The short story is that Napalm Death is a British grindcore band that got popular in the late 80s and continued a pretty illustrious career all the way up until modern day.
Now, Dan, have you listened to Napalm Death before? Because this was my first exposure, period.
Oh, yeah,
to
dude. I
Napalm
mean,
Death.
I've been listening to Scum for years and trying to figure out why, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But, my biggest Napalm Death album that I got was From Enslavement to Obliteration. And then I also had, like, Inside the Torn Apart and Smear Campaign. So, like, I've kind of been rocking those three records. So, like, there's, like, maybe 3 or 4 albums in their discography that I hadn't heard prior to doing this, but for the most part, I mean, I've been up and up on the Napalm Death.
I mean, it was a solid listen. I was surprised. Like, just the entire discography, I was, unsure when you're talking about a band that's run from 1987 all the way to 2015 with album releases, and you just don't, with that long of a career, you just don't know exactly what you're going to get between the first and the last. You can have an idea based on their current sound, but you just never know.
It's definitely a box of chocolates from hell, for sure. But what I like about Napalm Death is how damn seriously they take themselves, which normally is a thing that I don't appreciate about bands like this. But Napalm Death is not a band that's talking about fucking your girlfriend or about, how they're going to beat your ass in an hourly way. Like, this band has shit to say about world politics, and they say it loud and clear in a way that I think a lot of bands that sound like them don't. Like, most grindcore bands, all they care about is, like, chopping people up and eating them. And Napalm Death is more like, no, we need fucking reform. We need equal rights for everyone. We need clean water. We need third world countries to get support, Like, it's very refreshing reading through Napalm Death's lyrics. And this goes all the way back to Scum. They pulled no punches. I mean, their first song that you ever hear by them is just them screaming multinational corporations. It's like these guys give a shit about some things. And we don't run into that too much with the bands we talk about on the show. So many bands, it's all about your personal feelings or the fact that, like, you don't feel like you live up. You're not the man that you see in the mirror, or you are the man that you see in the mirror, and you hate that man. Napalm Death doesn't care about that shit. There's people dying out there, man.
This is something I regret, is that I didn't read, like, any of the lyrics to Napalm Death.
Oh, shit. It's just like having Jeff here.
Yeah. I normally read through the lyrics, but, man, there were so many albums. I'm just trying to, like, fit in, 2 kids, a wife, work, and trying to listen to this.
You're like, all right, sweetie, this is Scum. Listen up.
Here we go.
Well, before we start giving free publicity to multinational corporations, I want to take this time to say thank you to everyone for listening to the podcast. Thank you for listening and for subscribing. If you are not a subscriber, you can find everything Discography Discussion at discussmetal.com. We are on Google Play, iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, so if you have an Amazon Echo or a Google Home, you have no excuse. Ask it to play the latest episode of the Discography Discussion podcast, and it will. We are also on Facebook and on Twitter at Discuss Metal. Be sure to like, favorite, and subscribe. It really helps us out. It lets us know you're listening. And now Dan is going to tell you all about 5-star reviews.
We love 5-star reviews here on Discography Discussion. And the reason we like reviews is not because it makes us feel better or makes us feel like we're awesome human beings or anything like that.
It definitely helps.
It does help. I mean, it does make me feel a lot better. But the truth is that we live in a world that is run by electronic recommendations. There are actual robots now out there recommending what your podcasts should be. So if you listen to a podcast like ours, it's going to tell your friends and family to listen to podcasts like ours, but they won't do that unless we are a rated podcast. So if we're your favorite podcast, leave us a 5-star review. Leave us whatever kind of review you think we deserve, and we will read it on the podcast, which I actually have one that we just got on Friday from Ohio Joey. Good 5-star review, so thank you for that. And it says, I'm into the discussions for the most part, but your opinion on Blindside Shakina is wrong. Just so wrong.
So somebody named Joey.
Well, Joey.
In Ohio.
Yes.
Is saying Dan Terry is wrong.
Yes.
I think I figured out time travel.
Well, you know what? It's okay. You know what, man? If you like that song, more power to you. When I give these opinions, man, they're just that. They're just my opinions. And even though I think that they're correct, every now and again I need somebody to step in and take me down a notch. So thanks for the review, man, and hopefully we'll please you more in the future.
Well, and hey, he didn't detract a star from that. That was 5 stars, so still.
It was, yeah, I mean, do the math. It's one song out of the how many songs we've talked about now?
So it's still at least, a 95%.
We're in like the 99.8% on that. So
maybe it was
we're
just like 5
tracking.
seconds.
But I mean, if you think about all the songs we're going to talk about tonight with Napalm Death, it's like the same amount of songs we've talked about total in one band.
Chris Darby over on Twitter said, I just listened to your Living Sacrifice episode. I grew up with them boys. I enjoyed this very much. Well, we enjoyed it too. We grew up with those records, so
we did.
Feel like we grew up with them boys. Whereas you probably lived in the same street, so power to you, man.
This is a call out to DJ Sacrifice, who's been listening to us for a while there. And DJ, we want you to come on the show, man.
We need you to confirm your knowledge of someone named Chris Darby.
Yes, we do. So, DJ, come on, man. Let's talk. I would love to do a Patreon shout out to you guys who continually give us money every month to listen to what we've got going on. And this shout out goes to Jeffrey Santos.
The man.
You are the man.
The actual Mac.
He is the actual Mac. And at Mr. Alexander, thank you so much, man, for your contribution. And we could not do this without you. I mean, we could, but then we'd be way more poor than we are. So we appreciate you helping us out with that.
What have we been posting on Patreon lately?
Well, in case you didn't know, once a week we post an episode on Patreon, which is just an individual album review. It's usually about 15 to 20 minutes, or in the case of the Dying Fetus one, it was like 8 minutes because was not a whole lot to say about that album.
It's Dying Fetus.
It's Dying Fetus, wrong one to fuck with. That's all you need to know. So, we do individual album reviews, and I will be doing a series here very soon. There is a local bookstore called Books Galore that had a lot of weird underground metal albums that I've never heard before. So I picked all those up, and I will be listening to them individually and posting my results on Patreon for you guys to listen to. So,
and it is the first week of September, so those should be coming out momentarily.
Very soon.
So, Dan,
What's up, buddy?
Tell me about Napalm Death.
Well, as I said before, Napalm Death is a British grindcore band, and they are highly political, and they're more or less responsible for bringing the grindcore genre into the mainstream, if grindcore exists in the mainstream.
I'd venture to say not, because, I mean, before we don't want to get into the other albums yet, but I feel like they quickly pivoted away from the Scum sound.
What are you talking about, man? I think your grandma was listening to Scum all the time, right? When we were in high school.
Yeah,
She was all like, enslavement from enslavement to obliteration, bitches. Yeah, I remember that. That definitely happened in reality.
This is the thrash metal portion of Napalm Death's discography.
Oh, I disagree heavily. I think Scum from 1987 is just punk, man.
Yeah,
like
all
just
thrash
straight
metal is punk, according to you.
Yeah, but calling it thrash just doesn't seem right to me. It definitely sounds more like punk. Like a lot of the punk bands, because like I used to go to the Creepy Crawl and pay like $10 and then watch like 19 punk bands play in a row, and there was definitely a lot of this kind of shit going on during those shows. And Napalm Death was very obsessed with speed. Now, Scum has like 25 songs on it or something like that. And the first half of them are more punk rock oriented with like tons of blast beats and like just a lot of like really fast guitar strumming, like definitely like 3-chord monsters and a couple of like 1-second songs.
Yeah.
One thing that you may not know is that Bill Steer for the band Carcass was actually on side B of Scum.
Well, that completes the big four of grindcore, because you mentioned earlier about, is grindcore really mainstream? I think it's not, but I think many people know the name Napalm Death, Carcass, Pig Destroyer, and Cannibal Corpse. They may not all be grindcore, but I think that to the majority of people from this era, that's their definition of this type of metal.
I definitely feel you on Napalm Death and Carcass.
So I was just looking at some of my notes from Scum, and I remember, like getting the feeling of the album and as a whole is it's mostly, super fast, punk rock essentially. But then you get to the song Success, which is like, track 17, which is the Bill Steer side of the album. And they go into like this weird groovy section for a few seconds. I mean, you can only say a few seconds because the song's 1:09. But then it's interesting because even this early, they started playing with not just a straight, grindcore sound or punk sound and try to get to the end of the song as fast as possible. I also thought it was interesting that on Parasites, they had some kind of crazy screechy solo going on there.
Yeah, it's not an easy album to listen to. It's really not. Like, it objectively sucks. Like, in every sense of the word.
I think part of it is the sound quality, Like, the recording quality is not that great, but I also felt like the vocals kind of sounded like someone imitating what they heard coming down the road from a car as it drove by.
Yeah, I mean, it's so weird because nobody ever believes me whenever I say that grindcore came from punk rock. Everybody's always like, no, it came from death metal. I'm like, no, it didn't. It came alongside of death metal, but it actually wasn't. Death metal was like a continuation of thrash, whereas Napalm Death was just like, fuck it. We're just going to play 1,000,000 miles an hour and we're going to yell and screech or growl or whatever we got to do over it. And again, it was like whoever gets to the end of the song first wins. And it was just like, that was it. Like, that's where like bands like Carcass picked that up. And even early Bolt Thrower was like that, where they just played as fast as they possibly could. And it was all about the beat, about the blast beat and about the grind. Whereas death metal was a little bit more concerned with like musical complexity.
I am willing to give you, sir, that thrash metal came from punk rock. I'm willing to give you that death metal came from thrash. But are you trying to tell me that grindcore skipped the influence and just grew from punk rock itself. So we got two separate styles that are very similar, meaning the fast playing, blast beats, etc. We got thrash metal and grindcore, and the only difference is really the vocals. I'm clearly doing a, devil's advocate from the 80s, because people think they know everything.
Well, I would say the differences is in the approach, whereas grindcore definitely stuck more with the extremity and how fast it is and how quickly you can get it out, like short songs and stuff. Death metal kind of was more along the lines of like musical complexity and like different riff arrangements and time signatures and stuff, which is stuff that grindcore bands really weren't. They didn't really care about that stuff. Like, it was just like, let's just be fucking heavy.
I can see the logical progression from punk rock to this. Just play louder, play faster, play a solo on occasion. But they're clearly just trying to go as fast as they possibly can. And while an oi punk lead singer might be standing there yelling, as soon as you speed it up to this level, he's probably just going to start belting as fast as he can, and it ends up sounding like this, to a lesser extent.
Yeah, that is something I can criticize about Napalm Death, at least their early stuff, is that the vocals were definitely just, something on top of the music, and it wasn't trying to, follow with the rhythm or anything. But, I mean, I guess what rhythm was there to follow, because they're just trying to
just go as
be
fast
as heavy
as you can.
possible.
Yeah, and I think the vocals definitely improved on side B when they got Lee Dorian as the singer. He kind of had a better idea of what Napalm Death was supposed to sound like, and because the first singer on side A is just yelling, like Joe was talking about. He's just and like an oi punk singer just yelling over it as fast as he possibly can. Whereas Lee Dorian, was belting it out a lot faster and a lot more guttural with he's the one that started doing that for lack of a better description, that stuff in the background.
We're not quite mashed potato mouth on this one.
Well, it's pretty mashed potato mouth, man. It's hard to tell what's actually being said, if anything's really being said at all. And
welcome to my position on grindcore.
Well, I think this record sucks. It's kind of like the birthing pains of a genre. It's not very beautiful to look at right now, but it really serves for most people as a historical document, or your physical proof that no, dude, grindcore totally started as punk rock, because I've got this record called Scum that started off as a punk rock record and ended as a grindcore record. And so that's really where you can take it. And I think with the division of there being a side A and a side B with basically a different band on both sides, but it's all under the Napalm Death banner, that would become really interesting whenever you look at where the band was going to go further on in their career.
Yeah. It's interesting though, because I mean, you're saying it sucks, and stuff, which, yeah, it's not a good record, but maybe I'm insane, but it could have also been maybe the way I was consuming it. But, I'm driving down the highway at 90 miles an hour, because that's how fast you have to go in Tennessee.
And when you're listening to Napalm Death, that's how fast you have to go.
And I had fun with it. I also had it blaring in my headphones while I was playing Titanfall 2. And
well, you like raw black metal. I mean, it makes sense.
This is true, because I really enjoy the Horde album. So,
yeah, I mean, I don't love Scum. I'm not going to just listen to it. I'm never fuck, let's just put Scum on right now, it's never...
Yeah, that's never going to be the case, but I didn't hate it as much as I thought I was going to hate it based on what you were originally telling me about it.
Yeah, but now if you liked side B of Scum, then I think you're going to love From Enslavement to Obliteration, 1988, which is basically the same thing, but with a much better budget and with a little bit more thought in the songwriting.
Definitely. The first track that popped out at me was Unchallenged Hate.
Oh, yeah.
That song is awesome. I listened to that song on repeat 4 or 5 times because it just had such a great, interesting to say for being grindcore, a groove to it.
Yep.
Because they weren't trying to be as fast as possible all the time anymore. They had tons of really great, interesting riffs and stuff. It's definitely better than Scum.
It's more thought out than Scum, for sure.
Yeah. Like it was actually a really enjoyable listen. I would go back and listen to this one, but vocals still are little left to be desired. They're just not there for me yet.
Lee Dorian's vocals were really weird. It's hard to really fault him for it. I mean, I totally get what he was going for, but he delivered in such a way that it just like something just didn't sound quite right with it. And I think part of that though is just us listening to it with modern ears.
And probably a modern mix.
Yeah, like putting yourself... Yeah, well, dude, I've got like the full dynamic range mix on vinyl. This is the only Napalm Death album I have on vinyl because I just love it so much. And it's like... It's really well thought out, but like we're used to listening to grindcore screams and death metal screams and hardcore and metalcore screams. So like it's almost like there's a certain pre-made pattern, you know, that we look for when we're listening to bands. I mean, we're music critics. Like that's... We look for specific things. Going into records, and I think Lee Dorian's vocals are just so out there and so outside of the box that they just kind of are a little off-putting to modern ears, because like the high-pitched screeches don't sound quite like they should. The deep vocals don't really sound quite like they should, because we've heard 100 bands that came after this that did it better vocally.
Yeah,
that's the difficulty of going back to a band like this and hearing the influence. Because whatever they did, somebody heard it and said, I want to do that. But what that person came up with was way better. It's very difficult to go back to something like this and find enjoyment. That doesn't mean it's not heavy. That doesn't mean I don't like it. It's just so proportionately not as good.
But I mean, if you're a fan of the old Napalm Death sound, like that grindcore with punk rock attitude, From Enslavement to Obliteration is probably the best sounding representation of that.
Yeah.
And
I would listen to it at least once if you've not heard it. And I mean, if you're going to listen to one song off it, I mean, I'd pick Unchallenged Hate. Because that's definitely my favorite of the entire album.
Well, the album's only a half hour long. It's not like a huge time investment.
27 songs.
Yeah, 27 songs because it's Napalm Death. But yeah, so I mean, From Enslavement to Obliteration, I have to give special mention to, just for having like literally, like, out of all 15 albums, I think this one had the best fucking title. Out of all of them.
I can agree with that.
I mean, you're like, you know, your mom comes in and she's like, "What are you listening to, Freddie?" "I'm listening to fucking From Enslavement to Obliteration, Mom."
Watch your language, young
by
man.
Napalm fucking Death. You know, like that's street cred when you're 15. You know, like holy shit, like. You know, everybody else is like buying the new Korn album. You're like, "I'm gonna buy fucking From Enslavement to Obliteration." You know, like. It fucking just wins in every regard as far as the title goes. And the artwork's fucking great. I mean, just everything about that record's great. It's the reason it's the only Napalm Death album I have on vinyl, and it's the only one I want on vinyl. It's just amazing just in its presentation. It still has that what factor when people are looking through my records. Like, I just love it.
Yeah, like, what is this?
So after 15 albums, this shit was going to get kind of stale, right?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, there was no variation in any of it.
Well, the weird thing is that, like, you know, for as much as I went on and on about how grindcore, you know, was born alongside of death metal in, like, Satan's asshole or something, this album is death metal. Napalm Death went full death metal on this record. And Lee Dorian's out. Barney fucking Greenway is in.
Barney Greenway from Napalm Death.
The man.
The myth.
The legend. Barney Greenway.
The voice of Napalm Death.
And Buddy, how did you, or what's the story behind Barney Greenway? I know you know.
So I did a little bit of research into, like, Barney, because I know that that's not his real name. His name is Mark Greenway. You know, and so found out that he used to be a heavy alcoholic, and when he would get super drunk, he would start running into everything and just knocking stuff all over the place. And so people started calling him Rubble, and that somehow transformed into Barney Rubble, and then people just started calling him Barney.
I can relate to that in a big way. But no, that's awesome. I mean, to me, it's always Barney from Napalm Death. Dude is synonymous with the band. Like, I don't care how many original members get switched out between here and there. As long as Barney's singing it, it's Napalm Death. You know?
Yeah. I mean, because this is where, I mean, I really start paying attention, because I mean, the vocals definitely were a huge improvement, and they started focusing on a lot more of the groove aspects to things, just more musicality in general, less focus on trying to beat each other to the end of the song.
Right, it was death metal, like no blast beats. There were some blast beats, but like it was way more death metal than it was grindcore. Complicated song structures, different riffs, different time signatures, things like that. Stuff that they hadn't really done before.
Yeah, and this is where they reduced the amount of tracks too, because they increased the length of their songs. And now this album only has 10 tracks, but you're talking like an average song length of like 3.5 minutes as opposed to 45 seconds.
Are you disappointed in your average song length? Do you need to take some pills to enlarge the size of your song? If that's the case, then listen to Harmony Corruption, because that is absolutely the album to do it. Now, what's weird about this record, not accepted very well by punk rock grindcore fans. Like, this is one of those weird moments in history where people were such assholes that they actually accused a band of selling out by going death metal.
Which makes absolutely no sense.
Zero sense whatsoever. There's
no way that anybody would play this on radio, let alone even today.
There are dudes that are so fucking punk rock that if you go death metal, you might as well be Keith Urban. It's mind-blowing that anybody would ever, you'd have to be some kind of unpleasable punk rock fan.
So you guys went death metal now? Is that what's going on here?
Ladies and gentlemen, unpleasable punk rock fan.
Yeah, that's not punk rock, man. I'm not going with this thing. Your songs are too long. You guys spend too much time up on stage. I would have understood what you were saying, but I can't. I mean, you guys aren't actually criticizing politicians or going against society or telling people to join together in large groups. You're not doing that.
They still are. They're still criticizing politicians.
Well, I would know that if I could understand a word he was saying.
Well, yeah, I mean, so you can understand the lyrics to Scum?
I'm spending too much time in the mosh pit, man. I'm doing that pogo thing, up front. I just jump up and down a lot.
But isn't it better that they became better musicians and could write better songs?
You don't have to be a good musician to play punk rock. Punk rock is about energy. I mean, if you're not, Henry Rollins and Black Flag, then I don't know what you're talking about.
Ladies and gentlemen, unpleasable punk rock fan.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah,
I got my Converse All-Stars in the mail the other day. They're black and white. They're pretty nice.
Don't call me again.
I'm going to call next week.
No, don't call this number.
Tickets are going to be $10, right?
Don't call this number.
Let's change the number.
So Harmony Corruption, was kind of a dud as far as grindcore fans go, but as far as these three guys sitting right here, it was a pretty big step up. Sound-wise.
This is where it definitely increased in quality. I had a fun time listening to this one.
Yeah, a vocalist upgrade, a musical upgrade. They killed it on this record. It's one of the best of the early Napalm Death.
Yeah. Now, I will caveat my praise on this, though, and I'm still, even though Barney was a big upgrade, I'm still not a fan of the style of his vocals yet. They are better.
Fucking tool of a man.
I would tell you to get out of my house, but you're in your house.
You're in your house right now. But if you were in my house, you'd be in the shed getting whipped, because I'm into that sort of thing. They are better,
but they are not my favorite Barney yet.
Well, fair enough. I thought Barney was fucking great on Harmony Corruption, but that's just my correct opinion. Now, Napalm Death is not a band that doesn't listen to the fans. These guys gave a shit that people said that they sold out. They're like, you know what? We're going to kick your ass and we're going to grind you into the fucking dirt. So they all got together in a studio and they recorded this fucking piss and vinegar album called Utopia Banished.
Napalm Death, as far as I'm concerned, has arrived.
This is the closest thing they have to a consistent sound throughout. The blueprint for what would be Napalm Death from here on out can be found on Harmony Corruption. Now, that being said, this is
Utopia Banished.
Yeah, Utopia Banished, my bad. But the thing is that this is actually, despite being more grindcore, like there's a lot of grindcore on here, but it's definitely still a mix of death metal and grindcore. The lessons that they learned from Harmony Corruption are very much present on Utopia Banished. The songs are still complex, but they don't mind grinding out for a section.
Yeah, and I think at the same time, the sound just became so much heavier than the previous album as well. Like, I don't know if it's because they tuned lower or if it's because the recording quality is better, but everything has much more oomph and punch to it, which really makes this one enjoyable. And Barney, again, he's constantly upgrading his vocal style. Like, that's one thing I can say about, Barney, is that when he came in on Harmony, sure, I didn't really, his vocals were better, but I didn't really care for them. But every album, he just keeps getting better, and it's always better than the last album.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to agree with you on this record. And I think what was interesting about this record is everybody kind of wondered, like, when they did Harmony Corruption, they were like, okay, they did a death metal album, so they got a death metal vocalist. Barney was very much that. He fit the mold for that. So to see them playing material that's a little bit closer musically to From Enslavement to Obliteration, but hearing Barney sing over it, if you hadn't heard that before, you had no idea what you were missing. Because this dude can scream over some fucking punk rock shit like you wouldn't believe.
And he will for the next 12 records.
And he will. He is absolutely an energetic powerhouse and adds to what the band already has going on. And it's undeniable hearing him scream over those blast beats and just the faster stuff. And you're kind of like, fuck, where's my Scum re-record with Barney Greenway on vocals? Because that's what we all want. You could go back and re-record Scum and From Enslavement with Barney on it. It'd
be interesting to hear what those sound like with that. What I also thought was interesting was at the last track, Contemptuous, they almost there's like some melody going on.
Yeah, there is a little bit. Just a tad. Don't get used to it.
Just a tad. Yeah, as soon as you hear it, you go, oh, what? What's happening? And then you realize it's the last track, and you're like, okay, well, it's an album closer, so, you're allowed that, even if you're grindcore or death metal.
I'm not that guy anymore that's like, fuck, it's melodic, it's bullshit.
Oh, yeah, can't be.
I'm done with that. I've been a lot happier since.
Hey, Dan. 2003, Dan called. He said, listen to Zayo.
Fuck you. But, their new record is amazing. So there's that. So where do they go from here? I mean, they've become the darlings of the grindcore community once again.
They don't really go anywhere.
So how do they follow that up? Well, they followed up with a record called Fear, Emptiness, Despair.
This is like the beginning of what critics would say is Napalm's like experimental phase, which is easily marked by the fact of, like, if you look at their album covers, look at their logo. All of a sudden their logo is just stylized like regular text. It's not, the grit, thing that it was before. It's just basically type. And I wonder if that's to, kind of go with the idea of like, new metal's roots are starting to happen, not that this is new metal at all, but just this, I felt like I was listening to an album from 1994. It has that feeling all over it.
Funny thing you should say that. This came out in 1994.
Yep.
When every metal band either changed their style, upgraded their style, and definitely changed their logo. Why this happened, I don't know. Especially when they would go back later and change it back. But, there was that new font that we needed to try. James worked on it for, 5 minutes or something.
Well, the thing is that Fear, Emptiness, Despair is very similar to Harmony Corruption, in my opinion. It sounds more Harmony Corruption than Utopia Banished. And it's almost like they just slipped that in, like without anybody knowing. And I don't think people were as mad about it because you had kind of the more grind, upbeat punk rock sound that they were famous for. But the overall complexity of the songs is much higher on Fear, Emptiness, Despair. But the heaviness is not compromised one bit. And I think this record is kind of an indicator of where the band was going to go next. but I think fans were still on board because it was so heavy, because it was extreme, and it definitely had a budget behind it.
Yeah, it's I mean, I would say that like I don't think it's really grindcore anymore either. Like they really leaned heavily into the death metal aspect because all these songs have such a groove to them, for lack of a better term.
Right, and groove was like the hot shit in 1994.
Hell yeah.
That's what everybody was into. I mean, most of the 90s were dominated. I mean, this was like Pantera's Rise to Power, you know, like that sort of their vulgar display of power. And
the great escape from grunge.
Right. It was, you know, groove metal is the future. And even though it's not really my thing, I kind of understand how everybody got into it at the time. But I thought this record was still heavy enough for me to not care as much. Now that story is going to start changing here pretty quickly.
My thing with Napalm Death as a whole kind of really starts here. I like it. I like to peruse my library and pick out a Napalm Death record and listen to it. But not all of them will stick with you. And this is an example of, yeah, I haven't listened to this in a while. I enjoy it. Okay, what's next? I don't really look forward to listening to this Napalm Death because there's nothing really going on that's different. And I'm not saying you have to be different for it to be enjoyable, but it's just, okay, it's Napalm Death.
Well, then you're going to really enjoy the next album, 1996's Diatribes.
Ladies and gentlemen, Diatribes.
Because this is like Napalm Death in name only. This is straight groove metal. There's like sort of this like faux punk rock thing going on with it. But
except
like,
for the vocals.
Except for the vocals. But like even Barney sounds like he sounds fucking tired on this record. He's
Take
not
you
coming
to
at
my room. I want to show you all my wares.
He's not mad. He's kind of like, I don't know, like not that into it, I guess. Like, I don't know. I don't hear the grit. I don't hear the anger.
This sounds like the band was trying something different and Barney just showed up and said, well, I'm just going to keep doing what I do and that's going to be the album. And everybody agreed.
Well, like the band went in a musical direction and Barney was like, I'm just going to do the same shit that I always do. You know, but like that doesn't really work that well because it comes across sounding kind of disjointed. Like, I don't think the vocals match the music on this record at all.
So you're saying sometimes it's okay not to scream?
Well, but I don't know what else Barney's going to do. You know, I mean, for all we know, there's like a fucking Bruce Dickinson hiding in there, but I've never heard it. So I don't know. I think Barney's just really good at doing what he does, and that's it. And Diatribes musically is very interesting, though. It's interesting to listen to.
Yeah, it's funny that you guys, hate on this album and Fear Emptiness and stuff, but I really enjoyed these two albums. I thought they were really fun. Specifically on Diatribes, I noted that there was some really great drumming on the past two albums. But when I was driving and I was listening to Diatribes, and somewhere in the middle there, I just started doing word association in my head, and because I just get this overall feeling of the 90s from this album, and so I'm like thinking Weapon X Wolverine, Mortal Kombat, playing Sega Genesis, like even the cover just reminds me of just that in general.
Well, like, I think it's good. Like, it's interesting to listen to, but, like, it doesn't sound like Napalm Death.
No,
I guess is
agree.
The bottom line. Like, this is the first record where I was like, you guys really aren't living up to the name Napalm Death with this.
Well, it makes sense that you'd say that because, I mean, they changed they didn't change their name, but they definitely changed the style of their logo, which, it signifies a change in the sound. And so all the albums where I feel like they don't necessarily sound like Napalm Death, they don't even write their name like Napalm Death.
Right. I mean, I think they were trying to get away from that grindcore thing because, like, you could say that parts of it are kind of grindcore, but, like, they don't really grind. And the death metal isn't really all that deathy, so to speak.
Yeah.
It doesn't come across as an extreme metal release. And I totally get that, like, being, 6 albums into their career, that they're like, well, then now's the time for us to reach a more mainstream audience. But I don't know if that actually happens or not because, like, you've still got Barney doing, like, his regular vocals over the top of it. And so it's like now would be the time to throw in melodic hooks. And like they do that musically, but vocally they don't. And so like you've kind of got a record that doesn't know what it wants to be.
Their fans are mainstream metal fans that like to dip back into the extreme, meaning the vocals. These are people that really love Slayer, and then they listen to Napalm Death and Carcass. So are they changing because it's 1996 and people were taking risks?
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, you could say
careful.
that the sounds of this album feel a bit torn apart.
Okay, come on, man. You know, but Diatribes is interesting. It's like, wow, that's a really weird Napalm Death record. I wonder what they have next. So then 1997, Inside the Torn Apart comes out, and it's basically Diatribes Part 2, dude. Like, for all intents and purposes, it's almost the same record. Except somehow Barney Greenway sounds less into it than he did on Diatribes. Because, like, this record, I remember describing the vocals as if, like, a bear screaming into a pillow.
Or maybe he's, like, laying on the sofa and they just dangled the mic above him while he was sleeping.
And he's like,
and then the lyrics just came out in his dreams.
Hey, Dan, you ready to go to the studio?
Torn apart.
It's torn apart. You know, like, I'm not into it because the energy level just isn't there. And, like, I'm like, fuck, guys. And what's funny is, like, full disclosure, this is the first Napalm Death album that I ever bought. Was Inside the Torn Apart for $1.99 at CD Warehouse. And I was like, fuck yeah, Napalm Death. This shit's gonna get insane. I pop it in the CD player and I hear the song called, like, Breed to Breathe. And it's like Barney Greenway does this weird, like, talking shit on there. Like, he does his yelling or whatever, but he's like, "Oh, we free to feel."
Yeah, we're doing a Phil Anselmo thing.
Is this the right band? Like, I thought I put in a Napalm Death record. This is like this weird groovy melodic record that, like, it's actually really cool, but it's not what I wanted at that time.
Yeah, it's definitely not what you were expecting and not what you got.
Yeah, it was just like, come on, man. Like, where's the grindcore? You're supposed to be like the fucking grindcore gods, and I don't know what this is. This is just weird melodic, and, like, I can't call it mainstream because, like, nobody's gonna listen to it. Like, nobody that's into, like, Limp Bizkit's gonna listen to this, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't really know how to categorize it. It's just another really weird album.
I had one note on this album that just said, "There's melodic elements here now." That's all I had to say about it.
Right, but I guess it's an ethics question, though, right? Is it okay for a band called Napalm Death to be melodic? I mean, you could do whatever you want. Like I said, you know, it's not like people record albums because they want to know what Dan Terry thinks about them. They should.
Yeah.
But they don't.
I think it's okay for them to go melodic, but there just wasn't anything memorable about it.
Yeah, it just kind of hits you like a fucking vanilla wafer, you know? Like, it just hits you in the face and then falls to the floor.
I feel the same way about this that I feel about the first couple Iron Maiden records. They're out of place.
Interesting you say that.
And they don't really fit in, but they're okay. I'm not looking forward to listening to it again anytime soon, but if it pops up, yeah, sure, why not?
It's just all right. You know, and, like,
it doesn't leave anything with you, which is where the melodic elements are supposed to hook you. You know, you're supposed to be remembering that part. I don't even remember listening to this except for the ridiculous vocals on Inside the Torn Apart.
I don't know, man. Like, I think Unpleasable Metal Fan said it best whenever he said that, like, a band like Napalm Death isn't allowed to have clean vocals because they're not clean vocals in the sense, like, we're not talking like a Demon Hunter chorus here, they like, or anything like that. They didn't go like totally off the fucking chart, but like it was just weird. And I understand that it was the mid '90s and we're experimenting with different sounds and stuff, but like it just didn't hit well. It didn't grind. It just didn't do anything that you would expect a Napalm Death record to do. Like, is it interesting to listen to? It is while you're listening to it, but like we've said, it doesn't stick with you. It's just a thing that happens. It's an album that you can buy that has songs on it that you could listen to.
That is the perfect description of this record. It happens. It's a thing. Words from the exit wound. They're always bigger on the outside.
It's heavier. It's heavier than Inside the Torn Apart.
Yeah, but definitely the sound has been consistent with the past 4 albums. Like, this is definitely the fourth album where they're doing this, like, groove metal experiment type thing.
Well, and I'm just going to read my notes verbatim on this record. I wrote down, like, heavier and faster than Inside the Torn Apart. However, this still doesn't even come close to albums like From Enslavement to Obliteration or even Utopia Banished. Just makes you wonder what the fuck happened to this band in the 90s. At this point, we've gotten 3 records that just sound like straight up hardcore, not really grindcore or death metal or even a combination of the two. Points for originality, but these albums don't deliver the level of heaviness one would expect from a band called Napalm fucking Death. Also, the attempt at clean vocals on this record was pretty decent, but again, a band like Napalm Death shouldn't have clean vocals. It just shouldn't exist. It's melodic.
Ladies and gentlemen, unpleasable metal fan.
But, like, I don't get it. I don't get where they were coming from here. And I don't think they got it either. Especially with what we're going to talk about later.
Now, what's funny is that it's not like they changed labels because they're still on Earache, and they have the same producer for the last 3 albums, Colin Richardson.
Well, that's not surprising.
So,
yeah.
Well, you would then say, oh, well, it's probably Colin that had done this, but Colin also produced Utopia Banished.
All right, almost unfuck you, Colin, but mostly fuck you, Colin. I think he was pushing the band to do different things, and that's fine. But I'm just not into it. Like, it's not the badass grindcore band that I signed up for. And I realize it's just like a growing band. This is like throwing shit against the wall and hoping something sticks.
Yeah,
is really what these last 3 albums are. It's what all these last 3 albums are, is just throwing shit on the wall.
Yeah, I don't remember anything from this album. Like, it's just there.
Yeah, I mean, this is just kind of like probably what people would consider like the dark ages of the Napalm Death discography. And like listening to it all in one week, this is the hardest part to get through.
It really was. I had a hard time getting through Words from the Exit Wound. I was really glad for Traffic.
It just seems kind of shat out. Like, it exists. The political nature of the lyrics is there. Everything's the same as far as the last 3 albums go. The production quality is top notch, but that's kind of what makes me mad about it. Like, you've got the top notch production quality, so like you should be like fucking my ear holes with heaviness at this point. Like, it should be like this crazy, audio experience, and it's just not. And Barney doesn't seem into it. The band doesn't seem into it. It just seems half-hearted.
It's at that point that they realize that they have definitely done a disservice to everything that they've ever stood for. And they decide that they're going to be the enemy of the music business.
Ah, yes. I thought we would never get here.
Oh my. Talk about a return to form.
Year 2000, Napalm Death, enemy of the music business. They give the big middle finger to Earache Records, and they move on to greener pastures.
They even returned their logo back to normal.
Yeah, and holy shit. My notes say literally, now this is more fucking like it. I guess there must have been some issue with the record label going on, cutting all ties with the more commercial sound of their last 3 albums. Napalm Death delivers their most brutal album in a decade. This is straight-on heavy grindcore with lots of punk attitude, growling vocals, shouting vocals, blast beats, no clean vocals at all. This is one pissed-off sounding motherfucker and would kick-start this version of Napalm Death that lives up to its name.
This is some Inception shit right here where Dan is quoting himself.
This is by far the follow-up that we needed to Utopia Banished.
I wonder really what was going on there for about 5 years. They were consistently putting out a record every year to a year and a half, roughly. And they had that misstep in tone, misstep in feel, misstep in songs. I'm reminded of Neil Young when he was on I don't remember which record label it was, but they kept asking him to do a Neil Young record. And then he would do this experimental electronic shit, and they'd be like, well, you did that, but can you make us a Neil Young record? And he'd say, sure. And then he'd go make another one. And after 2 or 3 of those, they said, you know what, this isn't working out for us. And then he goes on and puts out a Neil Young record. And the moral of that story was he just didn't like his record label very much. So I wonder what was going on with Napalm Death to consistently put out that many records, but have it be so strangely different.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense that could have been exactly what was going on. I mean, who knows at this point, but all we can know is that Napalm Death is back, and they sound fantastic on this album.
So, any of the music business, like, I do know that they had problems with Earache Records, and I don't know if that's because they were trying to, like, control the way the band sounded. I mean, it kind of seems that way, right? But I don't know. Could have just been, like, a money thing. Like, maybe they were like, we want you to go play in Chicakistan, and you can't. But you had to pay your own way, but we'll totally pay you back. And, like, maybe they didn't pay him back. I don't know. I don't know what the story was, but they were fucking pissed.
On the cover of the Enemy of the Music Business album, like there's like a dude in a suit and tie, and he's got 2 different money symbols on his hands, and he's wearing devil horns. You know, like clearly they got some kind of distaste for just the music business in general. You know, label wise, probably.
Oh yeah, terrible taste in their mouth, for sure. Like, and this record, I mean, holy shit. Like, this is, like, what we wanted.
Yeah.
Like, beyond belief, this is what we wanted. And, like, Barney Greenway. Did somebody walk up to him before they recorded this album and be like, hey, Barney, is this your ice cream cone? And then they grabbed it, just threw it against the fucking wall. Because that's what he sounds like. Like, he sounds that level of pissed off. Like, it's a whole new Barney Greenway.
Yeah, because, I mean, anybody spilling your ice cream is going to make you far more mad than you've ever been.
Actually, I don't know if he eats ice cream because he's, like, super vegan.
True.
Which is why, like, in 2018, he still looks like he's 15. And the rest of the band looks like they're, like, 56. You know, like, it's kind of weird. He did make a comment whenever I saw them recently play with Slayer. He was like, yeah, we're older than the fucking dinosaurs. Like, and then he proceeded to play You Suffer. And then another, like, 1-second song. And it's like, how do you like them fucking apples? Really
we like
weird.
them very much. Please,
we
more.
did like them more. Give me more apples, Mr.
30
Greenway,
minutes,
sir.
You sure you can't come back on for more? Oh, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Dude, I could have watched them play for 2 hours, but I don't know if human beings could do that. Because they played all the heavy shit.
Welcome to Napalm Death's final show. We're going to play for 2 hours, all 1-minute songs.
I mean, that's probably why their songs were so short to begin with, because it was so hard to play, you know, for an extended period of time.
You can play two whole albums
kind of
in 23 minutes.
Well,
yeah.
they're punk rock. That's a thing.
Yeah.
So Enemy of the Music Business was great, but it's still kind of a little like it was kind of like dusting off of the machine a little bit. Like you could
I gotta
tell
sand and oil this thing again.
Yeah,
don't I?
like you could tell that they hadn't done this in a while.
Yeah.
And it sounds good. It sounds great. But I think it really came to a head on Order of the Leech.
This album is freaking heavy.
This album's just insane. Like, it's like, oh my god, it's from Enslavement to Obliteration again, but it's in 2002.
Like, whenever I hear the name Napalm Death, this is what I'm, like, expecting to hear.
Yes.
You know, like, this level of intensity.
This was the second album I purchased from Napalm Death.
You were significantly more satisfied with this one, weren't you?
Like, I wanted to go make out with the guy that worked at the counter at the CD store. I was like, oh my god.
CD store, can I help you?
Oh my god. Yeah.
You doing anything tonight, man? Because this Napalm Death record,
when's your shift over? Yeah, like it was it was that good, you know. And he recommended that because he was like, hey man, you like Napalm Death? I mean, not really, dude. You know, because I'd only had Inside the Torn Apart before that. And I was like, it's okay, but I mean, it just, you know, clearly it's before my time. He's like, oh no. And he, like, you know, might as well have like lifted a single finger up and just pressed it against my lips. And I'm like, no. You need to get Order of the Leech, bro.
Okay.
And that's what he sold me. And Could not have been more satisfied.
Wouldn't it be great if that was just his sales strategy? Like
my
everybody
God.
comes in. Have you heard Return of the Mac? What are you talking about? Shh.
Just pick this album up
You
now.
need to take this home with you.
Just listen to it, man. It's going to change your life.
My grandson really likes that Pantera. Shh.
Yeah, it's definitely a notch up from Enemy of the Music Business. Napalm Death now lives up to their name as an uncompromising grinding machine of a band. Barney Greenway sounds like piss and vinegar.
I was going to say, I was listening to this while I was mowing my lawn, and I mowed it in record time listening to this album.
Fuck this grass. Yeah.
Today is going to be a Napalm Death mowing. I only got 20 minutes.
So, buddy,
Shit.
I mean, it's funny how I remember all these different things from music because, I don't really sit and just listen to an album very much anymore. I'm always doing another thing while I'm listening to something. And so, I pretty much just associate this now with yard work. But, it's amazing when I do it.
Well,
because I actually get stuff done.
So what do you think of Barney Greenway's vocals now?
Now, this is what I'm talking about. This is where Barney is starting to sound like a giant freaking grizzly bear who got punched in the face and then thrown into a volcano and survived.
Yeah, I mean, dude is on point. like 1,000% on point. I've never heard anybody sound so fucking angry about politics in my life. Can you imagine what it would sound like if you were watching one of those political shows on C-SPAN or something, and all these dudes are arguing, and then Barney fucking Greenway just busts down the door and just starts going.
He just starts running a filibuster on it.
I'd watch a hell of a lot more C-SPAN if that were the case. But I mean, there's not a whole lot to say about it musically, in the sense that it is a straight-ahead grindcore album. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. This is grindcore. This is just in-your-face, punk rock influenced shit. Don't give me any of that Keith Urban death metal bullshit. This is
What's this fucker's obsession with Keith Urban today?
This is just straight fucking death metal. You guys want to just throw out Miley instead of Keith Urban? Is that where we're at? It's just... I don't know. I was listening. I mean, no, I wasn't listening to Keith Urban the other day.
Return of the Mac.
No, that's Mark Morrison, which is
I'm
great.
trying to get you off of this thing here,
Return
man.
of the Mac.
Okay, you feel better?
Yeah, I do.
All right.
Either way, this album is a fantastic listen. It's definitely one of their top albums, hands down. Order of the Leech is one to have in your collection.
So then you followed up with, "The code is red. Long live the code."
Oh, man. Who let Barney from Napalm Death in my basement?
Before we get to The Code is Red, hang on. We got a side note here because I didn't pay attention very well when I was going through my discography here. And I went from Order of the Leech to Leaders Not Followers Part 2.
Right, because they included it with the album, right?
Yeah, and I didn't I'm doing this all digitally, so, I just see it's oh, okay, this was logically next in the, succession, and it looked like a full track listing. I just, oh, this seems to be, a new album. So I listened to it, and it was a complete step back from Order of the Leech. And I'm like, what is going on here? And I didn't realize that it was a cover album until Dan told me, wait, dude, why are you listening to that album?
You have failed this podcast, buddy.
Studio albums only, friend.
Hey, I listened to this whole album, though.
Okay.
It was actually pretty good. But it was not The Code is Red.
Is that the one with Nazi Punks Fuck Off on it?
Yes.
Because that's a great song. They play that at every show.
Is that? No, it's not.
Well, that must be Leaders Not Followers Part 2 that has Nazi Punks Fuck Off.
No, that's what I'm saying. Nazi Punks is not on Leaders Not Followers.
Okay, it must be on, because there's two of them. There's Leaders Not Followers 1 and Leaders Not Followers 2. If you had as much of a hard-on for Napalm Death as I do, you would know that.
Well, this is the first time I've heard them, so...
Well, the code is red! Long live the code! Holy shit!
We're taking a step up.
Oh my god!
For real.
This is so pissed off. I can't even handle it sometimes. It's so heavy.
Now, did Barney start layering his vocals here? Because how is this sound humanly possible?
I don't know. But like I've seen him play it live, and it's possible, dude. Like it's totally possible.
I'm not gonna say he doesn't in a few spots, but for the most part, this is just one man going straight ahead.
One man on a mission.
And what you're hearing is what he's got to give.
That's
Dude,
insanity.
we need to get Barney Greenway on the podcast, even though he'll probably just want to talk about some punk rock band we've never heard of. I don't care. It needs to happen.
Well, you don't
Even
like
if it's
punk
just an
rock bands?
interview.
I think they're pretty cool.
The only catch is he has to do the whole podcast in the Napalm Death voice.
Yeah, there you go.
That's
So-
my only rule.
If we get Barney and Dan Wayant on the same show, do we just let them go for 2 hours, stop the recorder, and say, what did you guys talk about?
No, we're going to end up talking to Dan Wyan about, like, Napalm Death. Or I'm sorry. That would be amazing. No, we would get Dan to talk about, like, the Grateful Dead or the Butthole Surfers or something like that. Dude listens to chill music. It's probably a good thing.
I mean, yeah, when you play, pissed off music constantly, you got to have that secret chill, kind of stuff.
Right. Like
But
Mark Morrison.
I don't think Barney does, though. Like, how can you have to have some pent-up rage to be able to sound this way.
I think Barney eats, shits, and breathes politics and being angry.
And razor
Like,
blades.
And razor blades.
So this guy reads the paper, he watches
I hate to shit razor
CNBC,
blades.
and then he just goes and writes songs about how pissed off he is because he doesn't understand what they're talking about.
No, that's not it at all. Like, Napalm Death has some of the most intelligent lyrics of any band that sounds like this ever. Like, they really do. Like, it's... Like, I was reading some of their lyrics to my wife, and she was like, yeah, right on. Right on.
Party on, Wayne.
A grindcore band that talks about women's rights and, like, misogyny and, like, people dying in third world countries. Other grindcore bands don't sing about that shit. They sing about, like...
Death
and
Murder.
gore and murder and gore and murder and death.
Idea for a song. Murder.
You guys ever heard
Murder.
porno grind? That's just like porn lyrics with grindcore.
No.
Because, I mean, I guess somebody gets off on it.
Porn lyrics?
Somebody does.
You mean like the storyline from the porn? What are you
Maybe.
talking about?
Yeah, dude, if I had to put out a porno grind album tomorrow, I would call it, like, He Fixes the Cable and Leaves. Because that's what my cable career was. So, yeah.
Anyway, back on topic.
He gets locked in the basement. Check out our new album, He Gets Locked in the Basement. Yeah. Then he leaves. There's a common theme here. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that Napalm Death is not that. That, like, the code is red, long lives the code, man. Like, it's probably one of their most politically charged lyrics at a time where that really wasn't popular. And, considering the administration at the time in the U.S. and how really the rest of the world was, like, afraid of the U.S., and that's as political as I'm going to get. But, it's just... It really rang true for a lot of people, and that record was, like, huge. And it actually introduced a lot of new fans to Napalm Death. Because this is the time period where Napalm Death, as a huge exception to the rule of most bands that we talk about. Because, like, most bands that we talk about, you get to, like, Diatribes and Inside the Torn Apart, and it's all just shit after that. Napalm Death is putting out the best albums of their career in the 2000s.
Heartily agree.
Yeah, like, they are more relevant than they have ever been, and that, in my opinion, that all started with The Code is Red, Long Live the Code. Like, that record started off a trilogy of what I would consider to be perfect albums.
It's a very modern title, too.
Oh my God, yes. And even as insane and pissed off as that record is, it can't even compare to the shit that they throw out on Smear Campaign.
Holy crap, this album is so stinking brutal.
Like,
And you thought Barney was like, a beast beforehand? Like,
he's like a fucking deity of chaos on this record.
this dude was like, it's morphin' time. And you didn't know that there was another level.
What would the Napalm Death Zord look like? Would it be a giant robot made of chainsaws? Like, because that's the only thing that I can imagine at this point.
And the heads
Yeah,
just burst into flames.
It's
and
like-
it constantly just makes that sound. Just
It's like fucking Gigan from the Godzilla movies, but like all
Yes, but-
chainsaws from head to toe. Like, you can't
Yeah,
touch me
T-Rex
without
made out of
bleeding.
chainsaws. Yeah.
Yeah, like
It's fucking Jet Jaguar with shoulder pads.
I feel like Smear Campaign sounds like what From Enslavement to Obliteration would have sounded like now. You know, like, because that obviously was like probably the most extreme record ever put out in the 80s. Like, just objectively speaking, I don't think there was anything more extreme than that anyone knew about. Smear Campaign is on that level. Like, it is one of the heaviest records that they've ever released. And it's funny, too, because it starts off kind of dirgy. Like, I mean, and I'm not going to pronounce the name of that song because it's entirely impossible. But, you know, Sink Fast, Let Go. When that shit kicks in with those, like, high-pitched screeches, like, holy fuck. Like, you are going to be pummeled over the head with a fucking tire iron the entire time you're listening to this.
Speaking of modern vocals in 2009.
Somebody needs to give that guy a hug, but they might die.
I think before you even like got to hug Barney, your arms would open and then you would just incinerate from the thought of it.
Well, what's funny is, like, I know whenever I told you to check out Napalm Death, you were kind of like, you know, I don't know what dance he's in this band. And until you got up to, like, Order the Leech, you're like, okay, now I see it. Like,
Yep.
It's
Order of the Leech is definitely the start of what I expected.
oh, yeah. Because you're like, this band's called Napalm Death, so I expect all heavy all the time. You know, no exceptions.
Sheer utter brutality.
Yeah, dude, Smear Campaign is just it. Smear Campaign is it.
If I had more time, I mean, this is definitely an album I'll go back and re-listen to. You know, I was running out of time here trying to truck through all 15 of these albums, but I definitely enjoyed all the time I listened to with this one. 45 minutes long, too. Like, they're starting to put out some real lengthy records.
That complexity that they established on Harmony Corruption never really went away. And that's why a band like this is able to stay interesting, because they're more than what they appear to be, I guess, if that makes sense. Like, to the casual listener, you hear like 3 or 4 Napalm Death records, and you might come away with the feeling that, like, all this stuff sounds the same, you know? And It doesn't sound the same, really. Like, if you actually listen to it, you start seeing those subtleties. And so, like, an album like Smear Campaign is actually only one of a handful of albums that this band has put out that actually, like, sounds like where it's just uncompromising brutality throughout.
And that's okay for this type of music.
Totally fine.
It's okay for it to be an onslaught for 30 to 40 minutes. There really doesn't have to be a dynamic change.
They're realizing that, like, people love what they do.
Yeah.
And you may not go out and collect every album, but I mean, if you've got a copy of Smear Campaign or Order the Leech, you're good. You know, like, you don't really have to worry about it. Like, you're going to always get that great experience. But, you know, they did continue to make more albums. And I remember in 2009 when they released Time Waits for No Slave, there was a lot of hype to that album. Like, it was a big deal. Like, Napalm Death was back because they hadn't put out anything since Smear Campaign, and I think people were like, well, what's going on with this band? You know? And Time Waits for No Slave is a lot like Smear Campaign.
Smear Campaign Part 2, ladies and gentlemen.
It is. It really is. But I'm okay with it. Like I said, like, The Code is Red, Long Live the Code, Smear Campaign, and Time Waits for No Slave are like a perfect trilogy of albums for this band, because they're showing you that, like, yes, we exist, we are relevant, our stuff still matters, and we are still grinding heavier than most other bands out there. Because most grindcore at this point, I mean, even still today, is very much an underground thing. Napalm Death is the only band that you can really point to say that, like, they were a success in playing the grindcore genre.
Because, I mean, it's, you know, going on close to, 20 years now since they did their experimental 90s stuff, and, you know.
They figured it out. They passed the kidney stone of those 3 albums.
Are they successful because people know who Napalm Death is?
Oh, yeah.
Because Pig Destroyer, in the eyes of grindcore fans, would be successful.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would. I mean, you've got Silicon Valley name dropping, You Suffer. in one of their latest episodes.
Yeah, in Silicon Valley, Guilfoyle has an audible alarm when the server goes offline that it plays
when the price of Bitcoin changes.
Oh yeah, when the price of Bitcoin changes,
which makes it funny because it changes constantly.
And because all they hear is just like, and they're like, what? What was that? And he's like, that's You Suffer by Napalm Death. It's going to play every single time the value of Bitcoin changes. And so they're standing there in the office and all they hear just randomly for like 10 minutes, You Suffer! You Suffer! It's amazing. And but again, to have that type of mainstream appeal where people get it. They're like, oh yeah, Napalm Death. Those guys have been around, to quote Barney directly, since the fucking dinosaurs. So people know Napalm Death and they expect a certain experience out of the band, and they absolutely deliver that. Everything from Enemy of the Music Business on, they deliver that.
Now, I would note, I've got a note here that, they start to incorporate some more melodic elements throughout this album.
Yeah.
But it doesn't compromise the heaviness or the brutality of it at all.
No, because before they had to go into this weird groove territory in order to achieve that. And here they just kind of throw it in, and then they're like, hey, was that a melodic part? And they're like, what the fuck are you talking about? We've already gone back to grinding. It's almost like they're not trying to hide it, but
it's a trick to get your girlfriend to look at the stage.
Maybe. I don't know, man. I've met some girls in my day that love some heavy shit. So it's more like to get guys like me to look at the stage and be like, holy shit, you guys are dynamic. I had no idea. This isn't like In Flames that are go from being heavy to being don't want to live in a dream all day. It's not like that.
Oh man.
I think it's just musical integrity. I think they just, you know what? We're gonna throw this different part in there so that it's memorable, so you remember that. You'll go back and check out the track to hear that.
It also shows that they're comfortable with who they are, what their sound is, and they know that they can put in something slightly different, and it'll still be okay because then they still know what they're gonna do with the rest of the album and with the rest of the songs. Right. They're not compromising their sound at all. So
when Utilitarian came out in 2012, it's like, damn, they did it again. And they don't give a fuck. On this track, it starts off all melodic. On this song, this album, it starts off all melodic.
It was an instrumental. I was like, what?
Yeah.
Where did that come from?
Yeah, but it's okay. It's not weird and trite like it was in the 90s.
We're just trying something.
Yeah, but it's okay because it's kind of like what I said on the Dillinger Escape Plan album, where it was, or the Dillinger Escape Plan episode, where I basically said that Dillinger Escape Plan always experimented, but they also still delivered the goods. So if you are only here because of the grindcore at this point in their career, you're still going to get that.
Yeah.
There might be a little bit of experimentation that goes on, but if you're only here for Godzilla, you're still going to get it. You're still going to get that thing that you signed up for, that experience of okay, this is still Napalm Death.
Excuse me, sir. Are you here for Godzilla?
I'm only here for Godzilla, sir.
He hasn't arrived yet.
Well, I need to talk to your manager.
Shout out to previous episodes.
Right. So, the whole deal of it is that Napalm Death is still delivering on their promise of being an uncompromising grinding machine. And they do that all throughout Utilitarian. And they open the album off with an instrumental, which is just very different for them.
Yeah.
But it's okay. The songs are longer. Again, it's not like back when they put out From Enslavement to Obliteration and then put out Harmony Corruption right after. They're not trying to appeal to some British punk rock scene that existed. At this point, they're just we're Napalm Death. Everyone loves us. We're getting asked to play with Slayer on their final tour.
It's where they fucking belong.
They're on a whole nother level now.
Yeah.
And they're a legacy act now. You don't go see Napalm Death to hear shit like Diatribes. They're never going to do a Diatribes reunion tour.
That'd be the worst sold reunion tour ever.
It'd be horrible. Be horrible. Even I wouldn't go see it. And I love the band. But with shit like Utilitarian, I mean, they just kill it. Like, he's so much more precise. That's one thing that I noticed on the last two Napalm Death albums specifically, is that they are much tighter and concise, like delivering like very well planned out assaults on your ears, but then throwing in some experimental elements to keep you interested.
Yeah, they've been extremely consistent since The Code is Red. Like, you put the album in, and it's, for me, because I listened to everything like right in a row so quickly and only once, some of it ran together a little bit, but that also speaks to the quality of what they're putting out, is that they know who they are, and they're putting out an extremely consistent sound, and that consistent sound is amazing.
Right, yeah, you don't care that it runs together.
Exactly.
So much, And
I know that it doesn't actually run together, that all these albums do have a different sound, but I've only heard them one time, and I basically heard them like yesterday.
Hey man, I ask you to listen to all this stuff in a week. You know what I mean? Like, that's rough.
It's a task.
It's tough.
I've been listening to Apex Predator since 2015 when it came out. You know what I mean? Like, I've had some time to get to know it. And this record's interesting too, because it's not very often that I say that like the band's newest record is their best one. It's not my personal favorite. I mean, that's going to always be Smear Campaign. But Apex Predator to Easy Meat is one of those like, holy shit, it's 2015 and Napalm Death is still doing it. They're performing at a level that is beyond what they performed at before. And like, I just don't get it. Like, I don't understand how they can be so energetic with being as old as they are. But like, Apex Predator was like a fucking revelation to me. It was my go-to heavy record since 2015. And there's not a lot of bands that say that about it. I listen to a lot of heavy bands. I listen to a lot of heavy shit. But Napalm Death delivers everything all the way back. I mean, they basically got 3 careers under their belts. If you want to divide their career up to like 5 albums here, 5 albums here, 5 albums here, they basically got 3 separate careers, and their newest one is still the best. They're putting out the best music of their career now.
I mean, it makes me wonder if the reason why it's so incredible is that they typically take about 2 to 3 months to record an album. And for Apex Predator, I mean, it could be that I didn't find enough research on this maybe, but it just says that they recorded it in 2014. So it could be that they spent the entirety of 2014 working on this record. So this could be a year's worth of, refinement that is helping this album to sound so amazing.
Yeah, like it's the best shit they've ever put out. I mean, I still love Smear Campaign. It's a personal favorite of mine. I still love From Enslavement to Obliteration. But it's all part of just like one big picture for me. And Apex Predator Easy Meat is just like the album to kind of cap that off. And like, I know they're going to be putting on a new one here pretty soon, and we'll probably hit that up on the Patreon episode whenever that drops. But I can tell you that really anything from really Order of the Leech on is going to be your shit. You might enjoy some of the old stuff earlier, but if you only had to listen to a few Napalm Death albums, this would be the one. They're putting out the best fucking music that they can right now. I know I've said that like 100 times on this podcast, but I can't stress it enough. Napalm Death is relevant now. They're a band you should be paying attention to now. And you need to buy every single one of their releases that comes out from here on out.
Yeah, it's definitely not like a classic act or anything. They stand toe to toe with any of the modern, metal bands coming out now.
I think they blow a lot of the deathcore bands that are out there out of the water.
Yeah.
Like from a level of energy, like they bring it so consistently. And like a lot of the deathcore and hardcore that's out there is just like really formulaic. And you could say that Napalm Death is formulaic, but they're not really. They're kind of getting to the point where I don't know what the fuck they're going to do next.
Yeah, I'm super excited to hear what they put out next after Apex. Like, again, can Barney top his vocals? I mean,
he always can.
He always does.
Final thoughts on Napalm Death? Buddy.
Oh, shoot. I mean, I consumed this entire thing in, like, the entirety of a week. But it's pretty clear to me, like, I'm going to be listening to The Code is Red on, like, consistently. I'll keep those in my library for sure. Apex Predator was definitely a nice, like, cap off to the whole thing. Like, they're just putting out really fantastic metal. They're a great listen, and you won't regret it.
I like Napalm Death. I'm not a big fan of grindcore, but here we are. I think if you're a thrash fan or a heavy metal fan from the 80s and you are looking for something modern that has a little bit of old school feel, you definitely need to be listening to Napalm Death. Dan, what about you?
I think that if you're a fan of like open note breakdowns and shit and like weird tremolo picking parts and like dudes that are like sounding like dying fucking goats whenever they're screaming their shit over these slow ass breakdowns, I think you're missing out. You need to listen to Napalm Death because they're going to bring the fucking energy. They're going to bring the intensity that you didn't even know that you were missing from all the heavy shit you listen to now.
And what's your album of the week, buddy?
Oh, shoot. Well, I've only been listening to Napalm Death. So my album of the week is probably going to be somewhere between Smear Campaign and Apex Predator. One of those two. Those were definitely my favorite listens.
Well, I've been listening to a lot of Worship and Tribute by Glassjaw.
And after being forced to listen to Dan listen to Worship and Tribute by Glassjaw and sing it karaoke style, I'm getting ready for the next Patreon episode. I've been listening to 13 by Mushroomhead.
Ooh, very nice.
Yes, we are going to have a good time talking about that album on Patreon.
Sun doesn't rise no more, friend.
Sun doesn't rise at all.
I know, it's being funny. Maybe I wasn't.
No.
That's probably it.
And on that note, this has been episode 80 of Discography Discussion. Thank you for listening. You can like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at discussmetal. Subscribe to our podcast everywhere you listen to podcasts, including Google Play, iTunes, and Stitcher. Visit discussmetal.com for all things discography discussion, and please send questions and comments to danandjoeshow@gmail.com. If you are not a patron, you can become one at patreon.com/discussmetal. We have some sweet perks.
Give me your money!
Give me your money!